Seriously, why did they do it? Picture this. Amidst flying bullets, earth-shaking cannon fire, and the screams of the dying, Civil War soldiers bit down on paper cylinders filled with gunpowder. At Gettysburg, in the wilderness, along Antietam's bloody lane, they risked blowing their own faces apart just to load their rifles. Was it reckless desperation? A deadly secret hidden in the paper? Or the only thing standing between them and a bayonet in the gut? The truth is darker and more fascinating than you'd ever guess. Let's uncover why this terrifying act wasn't just necessary. It shaped the very war itself. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. The Civil War soldier, whether clad in Union blue or Confederate gray, faced the deafening chaos of battle with a muzzle-loading rifle musket as his primary weapon. At Gettysburg's bloody wheat field, amidst the choking smoke and screams, during the relentless close-range slaughter along Antietam's sunken road, or fighting blindly in the tangled, suffocating thickets at Spotsylvania, each desperate reload required a critical, intimate act, biting the end off a paper cartridge. His life depended on speed. These cartridges were vital paper cylinders, roughly lipstick-sized. One end held a conical Minié ball, a soft lead projectile capable of horrific wounds. The rest contained a precisely measured charge of coarse, gritty black gunpowder, the twisted paper end securing the volatile contents. This pre-measured package enabled the rapid volley fire that defined infantry combat, the infantryman's absolute lifeline in the storm of battle. But why bite it? Why risk bringing explosive powder near your face amidst flying lead? The answer was brutal, unforgiving necessity. Raw speed. Survival on those lethal fields depended entirely on reloading faster than the enemy, advancing through the corn or cresting the stone wall. Seconds lost fumbling could mean death before the next breath or watching your section of the line crumble. Loading involved a complex sequence, pouring powder down the barrel, inserting the bullet, ramming it firmly home, placing a tiny percussion cap on the weapon's nipple, cocking the hammer, and finally aiming and firing. The cartridge ingeniously combined powder and bullet, but the powder needed instant exposure to pour. Biting off the twisted end was simply the fastest, most reliable method under the extreme, mind-numbing duress of combat. Amidst the earth-shaking roar of massed cannon at Fredericksburg, or the terrifying, intimate horror of the hand-to-hand struggle in the Muleshoe salient at Spotsylvania, hands shook violently from sheer terror, bone-deep exhaustion, or the concussive blast of a nearby shell. Fingers grew numb with freezing cold on winter marches, stiff from hours of gripping the stock, slick with sweat under a blazing southern sun, caked in thick mud from spring rains, or stained and slippery with a comrade's blood. Tearing that incredibly tough paper with compromised fingers was often impossible, fatally slow work. Teeth, however, delivered a single, decisive, powerful bite. An accessible, gross motor skill far more resistant to the way adrenaline shattered fine motor control. You can imagine the desperate focus. Bite, pour, ram, cap, fire. This method wasn't new to the 1860s. It descended directly from decades of standardized drill with earlier smoothbore muskets, a practice ingrained in soldiers from the Revolution through the Mexican-American War. Recruits, sweating on dusty parade grounds from Massachusetts to Georgia, were relentlessly trained, hour after hour, until biting, tearing, pouring, and ramming became unconscious muscle memory. This drilled-in sequence could be executed even amidst the utter hellish confusion and panic of Shiloh's disastrous first day. For Confederates, however, this essential life-preserving act acquired a terrifying, poisonous dimension. A persistent, malicious rumor swept through Southern camps and battle lines, amplified by inflammatory rags like the Charleston Mercury, and even by some officers seeking to stoke hatred. Union cartridge paper was deliberately poisoned or saturated with quicklime. Biting one, the story screamed, caused a soldier's mouth to instantly blister, rot away, and led to an agonizing, screaming death. A potent, deliberate tool of psychological warfare exploiting deep-seated fears, regional hatreds, and the inherent paranoia bred by war's chaos. This entirely baseless myth had chillingly real consequences on the field. At Chickamauga, victorious Confederates scavenging Union ammunition from the dead sometimes resorted to painstakingly using belt knives or fingernails to tear cartridges open, sacrificing crucial reloading speed for imagined safety. Others, paralyzed by the fear, refused to use captured cartridges entirely, potentially disarming themselves at the worst possible moment as Union reinforcements surged forward. The insidious fear thrived in the chaotic, rumor-filled fog of war, where truth was the first casualty. The real cause of the bitter taste and raw, bleeding mouths was far more mundane, yet brutally harsh. Union paper was standard stock, sometimes glazed with potassium nitrate, saltpeter, a core gunpowder component, leaving a distinct bitter, metallic, but non-poisonous residue. Lime was never used. The true physical toll came from the relentless act itself. Corrosive, foul-tasting black powder grit mixed with coarse paper fibers forced into tender gums, lips, and cheeks by the violent action of biting. During prolonged, murderous engagements like the desperate defense of Burnside's bridge at Antietam or the grinding, rat-infested misery of the Petersburg trenches, soldiers bit cartridges dozens, even hundreds of times. This constant assault shredded soft tissue, causing agonizingly raw, bleeding sores that easily festered into infections. Chronic dehydration, wretched hardtack and salt pork diets, and the pervasive filth of campaign life only worsened the torment. For Union soldiers enduring the wholesale slaughter in the trenches at Cold Harbor, the primary burden wasn't fear of poison, but the cumulative, painful physical damage and the constant, gritty sensory reminder of the killing act. The acrid gunpowder taste mixed with the coppery tang of their own blood from shredded lips and swollen gums became combat's indelible, foul signature. Each savage bite a necessary step towards delivering another potentially lethal minié ball across the smoke-filled field. The cartridge bite's grim legacy directly shaped the future of firearms technology. The urgent wartime need for faster loading rates, combined with the bite's undeniable drawbacks, the self-inflicted oral damage, the vulnerability to dampness, like the torrential rains that soaked men and paper before Gettysburg, and the inherent slowness compared to emerging alternatives, became a major driver for adopting revolutionary new weapons. Breech-loading rifles and carbines, firing self-contained metallic cartridges, saw significant use later in the war, particularly by Union cavalry wielding rapid-fire Spencer carbines. These loaded from the rear, simply inserting a sturdy brass cartridge, closing the breech block, aiming and firing rendered the archaic rituals of biting paper and ramming rods obsolete. So, why did Civil War soldiers bite their cartridges? Because in the desperate calculus of survival, under the relentless storm of lead at places like Malvern Hill or the Hornet's Nest, it remained the fastest, most brutally reliable loading method, a dangerous inheritance from earlier wars. Because rumor and fear could weaponize even a scrap of paper, turning a vital act into a source of deep-seated terror for half the army. And because the relentless physical reality of biting, tearing paper, tasting bitter powder, enduring searing pain, forged an intimate, gritty, unforgettable sensory experience of a war defined by close-range horror and industrial-scale slaughter. It was a small, repeated violence inflicted upon oneself, a necessary brutality to enable the far greater violence unleashed upon the foe just yards away.